club. So over to you next.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming very much. It's something that I really thought should be done on Sir Noel and Lord Attenborough, and not forgetting us as orphans. And this is Michael Attenborough, son of Lord Richard Attenborough, who's going to do the unveiling for us. Give us a few anecdotes, I hope.
Yes, absolutely. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Shout if you can. Not too loud. I have to tell you that Silverlands played a role in my life from a very, very early age. And I'm principally going to talk to you today about two fathers. Please sit down, particularly if I talk to you. And I remember Silverland. It's a rather wonderful, beautiful, memorable name. But I remember coming here as well. But this extraordinary woman on my right here wrote to me, it's a very compliment, it's a compliment, wrote to me when Dad passed away. And it was incredibly moving, because what she was in bereavement about was, as she phrased it, the loss of her father. That actually what had happened was that my parents, when they took over Silverlands from Noel, became like the mother and father to all the children there. And not only did Susanna talk about the regularity with which they visited Silverlands, they were incredibly impressed at the fact that they remembered everybody's names. And so I'm standing next to my sister, and we would not be standing here were it not for Susanna's efforts. And it's so easy, in my humble opinion, for these great moments in the past to disappear into the mist, and we forget them. And actually people's legacies, what people do in their lives, should live on in some form or other. And what Susanna's achieved is that a moment, a relationship between Noel and my dad lives on. And what they did for Susanna and others lives on. And that's very important. Particularly, I would venture to suggest, in a time where we're not terribly good at looking after other people. The word care is always in the headlines in one form or other, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So I'm hugely grateful for you allowing this to happen, for you arranging for it to happen. But I cannot possibly continue without telling you one or two stories. So, first is that Dad first met Noel when he was still at RADA. He wanted the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. And I'm pretty certain he must have been cast by the casting project, not by Noel himself, because of this story which Dad always told me. And he was still at RADA, he was fished in for the filming, actually rather an apt metaphor, because he played a quaking stoker in absolute terror on a submarine. And he deserts his post. It's a wonderful part, actually. So they're under pressure, and there's explosions going all over the place, and he becomes terrified and runs. And then he's so ashamed of what he's done. There's a wonderful scene later in the film where they're on leave in the dock, and he goes to a pub and gets himself absolutely legless drunk in order to forget what he's done, which he can't do, of course. And then there's a scene, rather famous scene right at the end, where Noel's character, which is in fact based on Lord Mountbatten, is addressing the whole crew and complimenting them on their service, and then he says, except for one man, and this image just closes in on this frightened face of my dad looking about 12, and very, 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 very young. But this was his first job, and he was standing there in his costume, waiting to rehearse, and the door of those big sound stages at Pinewood Studios opened, and in walked Noel Coward. Now, you have to remember, he was the most famous, highly regarded person in the whole of the movie and theatre industry. That's why he was called the Master. So we're talking about a regal figure entering his court. And behind him was the man who co-directed the movie with him, David Lean, whom you may well know as an amazing director in his own right, and the editor, Ron King, who also went on to be a rather awesome film editor. Anyway, he walked straight up to Dad and said, "You won't know who I am, I'm Noel Coward, but I know who you are, you're Richard Attenborough. Come with me, I'm going to show you around." And Dad was, of course, absolutely speechless, and of course at the moment believed that Noel Coward had heard of him. You know, this absurd idea. But of course what Noel was doing was relaxing him, looking after him. And there began a quite extraordinary relationship that endured right the way through to Noel's death. And Dad always used to say to me, he's known for his clipped tone, and he's very trying to stiff up a lip, humour, and not showing emotion. And he said, "Do not be fooled. Up the night behind that long cigarette holder exterior beats a very remarkable heart." And Silverlands is a very, very good example of how that heart comes around and about the generosity of his work. And I have to tell you, this is rather outrageous to tell you, but I had 8 godparents, for goodness sake. And it reads like a cast list for a rather fine film. But Noel was the most generous and regular of them all. Now, how could I possibly adding them all up to see who was the most generous? But he was. And I still to this day have one half book tables from your godfather Noel. And a beautiful silver goblet on my christening, and beautiful wine glasses when I got married. I mean, he was always absolutely adorable to us. Just a PS to all that. Noel's agent Alan was reminding me that he being Dad, took his parents, who incidentally were very opposed, had been very opposed to him becoming an actor. My grandfather was an academic, principal at Leicester University, didn't want him to be an actor at all. There you go. And he took his parents very proudly to watch at the premiere his first job. And he sat there and waited at the end, the cast list going up. They'd forgotten to put him on. No mention. And I have to tell you, to this day, if you see In Which We Serve, the film I'm talking about, there is no mention of Richard Attenborough. And the other little PS I want to tell you is that we had a gorgeous meeting right towards the end of his life. I studied at Sussex University, read English, and my father, I used to tease him that I'd managed to get him into university, he owed it to me. He became Pro-Chancellor of Sussex. And one of the privileges that offers is to nominate people for honorary degrees. So he rang Noel and said, "Now Noel, I want to nominate you for an honorary degree at Sussex University, but I'm not going to do so if you're going to turn it down." So, "Oh no, I'd be absolutely charming, how wonderful." And was thrilled and said he'd never been offered it. Which is, you have to remember, because he was gay, he had moved abroad. Homosexuality was still illegal at that time. Dad duly proposed it for Sussex, accepted, and Noel came over, quite frail, and there is to this day the most wonderful photograph. I mean, I still have it on my telephone. There you go. And it's at the graduation, and there's Noel sitting down, which is where he spent most of the day, he was so frail, with a cigarette, of course. And me standing there with hair down to here, because I was a hippie. It was 1972, for goodness sake, and I was a radical chic university called Sussex. So obviously I had long hair, and my dad, as Pro-Chancellor, I mean, honestly, we looked like 3 Ayatollahs. I mean, these absurd hats. And he kept tugging at my hands. Couldn't quite believe the length of it, whether I was uncertain of my gender. But it was a wonderful occasion, and it was one of 3 great occasions which I remember meeting him. So there we are, 2 very, very different men. The younger one always, till the end of Noel's life, looking up to him as his mentor, as his artistic father. Dad was a bit in awe of his own father, but they were very close. But the person he took advice from, the person he looked up to, was Noel. And Noel loved Dad hugely. And I don't think it's expressed any better than it is in their relationship in relation to Silverlands. Because of Noel asking Dad to take over. So without more ado, shall I pull a certain...
Please do. We'll all raise our glasses to it, please.
Are you good with shots? Okay, here we go.
Oh, there. Yes.